After the garbage man heroically saved a girl from her abusive father, he believed the nightmare was finally over for the traumatized family. However, the abusive ex-husband still blamed them for his arrest and would use his wealth and influence to try anything to get his daughter back. The mother and daughter's fragile sense of safety would soon be shattered by a turn of events that no one could have predicted. Before we dive into part 2 of this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The early morning light was just beginning to creep over the horizon as Marcus Taylor pulled into the garbage collection depot. The events of yesterday still weighed heavily on his mind, a whirlwind of drama that had disrupted his normally routine day. As he clocked in, the admin at the front desk immediately informed him that the manager wanted to see him. A flutter of anxiety rippled through Marcus's stomach. He knew this conversation was coming, but he hadn't expected it so soon. As he walked towards the manager's office, Marcus rehearsed his explanation of yesterday's events in his head. He knew he had broken several company protocols, despite his good intentions and heroic deeds. Approaching the manager's door, Marcus took a deep breath. He wondered about the implications of this meeting. Would he still have a job by the end of it? He had acted on instinct yesterday, driven by a desire to help. But would his employer see it that way? With a slightly trembling hand, Marcus knocked on the office door. After a moment, he heard a gruff come in from the other side. Steeling himself, Marcus entered the office, greeting his manager with a polite yet nervous, "Good morning, sir." The manager, a stocky man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, gestured for Marcus to take a seat. "Marcus," he began, his tone neutral, "I want to hear everything that happened yesterday. I've heard some versions from other staff, but I want to hear it directly from you." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath before launching into his account. He explained how he couldn't avoid seeing the contents of the loosely tied garbage bag, filled with brand new items. He described his decision to ask the lady of the house about the discarded items, his concern growing as he noticed her distress and her daughter's fear. As he recounted helping the girl when she ran away from her father and using the garbage truck as a roadblock when the father was trying to escape from the police, Marcus maintained eye contact with his manager. His voice remained steady, confident in his actions despite his concerns about potential consequences. To Marcus's surprise, when he finished his account, the manager's expression softened slightly. "Marcus," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I want to commend your bravery. What you did yesterday potentially saved lives." Then his tone grew firmer. "However, I can't have you making heroics a habit. I won't punish you for this, but I don't expect you to be a hero again anytime soon. Don't make it a habit." The manager then shifted the conversation to a stern reminder about privacy policies and the dangers of going through residents' trash. "Next time, you might be the one who ends up in jail," he warned. "That privacy policy is meant to protect not only the public but also workers like you and the depot." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir. It won't happen again." The manager seemed satisfied with this response. "Good. Now there's one more thing. Your regular partner is still ill, so you'll be training a new partner today." Just as Marcus was processing this unexpected news, the manager pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send in the new employee," he instructed someone on the other end. As they waited, the manager's tone suggested that this assignment was both a fresh start and a test of Marcus's ability to follow protocol after yesterday's events. Marcus straightened in his chair, determined to prove himself. The office door opened, and a young man entered, his demeanor radiating a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Marcus's eyes were immediately drawn to the newcomer's striking appearance. His dark amber skin contrasted beautifully with his long, curly hair, which was pulled back into a neat ponytail. But it was his distinct accent that caught Marcus's attention as he introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Kona," he said, his voice carrying a melodic lilt that Marcus couldn't quite place. The manager nodded, gesturing for Kona to stand next to Marcus. "Kona, this is Marcus. He'll be training you today." Turning to Marcus, he continued, "I want you to show Kona the ropes. He'll drive while you handle collections and mechanics. Use this opportunity to help your new partner get familiar with the route. and train him on operating the truck's full functions. With a wave of his hand, the manager dismissed them both. As they turned to leave, he added, "And Marcus, remember what we discussed. Complete the route on time and avoid any surprises." The pointed reminder of yesterday's events wasn't lost on Marcus. As they exited the office, Marcus led Kona towards their assigned truck, the same one from yesterday's incident. The familiar space now felt different with a new partner, creating a subtle tension in their interaction. "All right, Kona," Marcus began, his voice taking on a professional tone. "Let's start with a walkthrough of the vehicle's features." He proceeded to give Kona a thorough orientation, explaining each button, lever, and screen in the cab. As they settled into their seats, Kona turned to Marcus with a slightly sheepish expression. "I should mention, I'm not very familiar with the roads around here." Marcus nodded, reaching for the GPS unit, a tool he hadn't needed to use in years. As he set it up, curiosity got the better of him. "If you don't mind me asking, where are you from? I've never heard an accent quite like yours before." Kona's face lit up at the question. "I'm originally from Cuba," he explained as Marcus guided the truck out of the depot. "I was living in Los Angeles until recently, but after my aunt passed away, I decided to move somewhere more affordable. That's how I ended up here in the suburbs." Marcus nodded, intrigued by Kona's background. As they drove towards their first stop, he found himself wondering about the journey that had brought Kona from Cuba to Los Angeles, and now here to their small suburban town. As they reached the first neighborhood on their route, Marcus took the lead in demonstrating their collection routine. He explained to Kona how to pace the truck's movement while Marcus worked outside. "Just keep driving slowly," Marcus instructed as he hopped out of the cab. "I'll catch up with the truck while collecting the rubbish outside. It's more efficient this way." The morning sun gradually intensified as they established their rhythm, though it quickly became apparent that Kona's learning curve was steeper than Marcus had anticipated. What had been efficient solo work yesterday now moved at a markedly slower pace with his inexperienced partner. Each stop required more detailed instruction from Marcus. He found himself exercising unexpected patience, remembering his own early days on the route. Despite his growing frustration at the mounting delays, Marcus maintained a teaching mindset. "That's it, Kona," he encouraged, as his partner finally managed to time the truck's movement correctly with Marcus's collection pace. "You're getting the hang of it." As they progressed through the neighborhoods, each stop became a mini-lesson in timing and technique. Marcus was acutely aware of the clock ticking against their schedule, but he reminded himself that proper training now would pay off in the long run. By the time they arrived at the Brightwood neighborhood, it was 8 a.m., a full 15 minutes behind yesterday's already delayed schedule. As they navigated between the familiar houses, Marcus felt a surge of memories from the previous day's events. The quiet streets carried echoes of yesterday's drama, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder how Rachel and Lucy were doing. As he loaded the garbage from house to house, his thoughts kept drifting to the mother and daughter. When they reached the house next to Rachel and Lucy's, Marcus found himself stealing glances at their home, wondering if they were inside, how they were coping with the aftermath of yesterday's trauma. As they approached Rachel and Lucy's house, Marcus noticed the closed curtains and unusual silence. The overflowing garbage bins told a story of intensive cleaning, likely removing traces of yesterday's violence. Marcus's heart ached as he imagined Rachel and Lucy, exhausted and traumatized, trying to erase the physical reminders of their ordeal. His professional focus momentarily wavered as concern for the family surfaced. As he began to sort through the trash, he noted the broken photo frames, wood splinters, and a broken baseball bat. All painful reminders of yesterday's violence. Dennis's suitcase and clothes were also among the discarded items, a clear sign that Rachel was purging all traces of her abusive ex-husband from their lives. Just as Marcus moved to handle Rachel and Lucy's trash collection, Kona's voice called out from the cab. "Hey, Marcus, mind if I try operating the mechanical arm? This house seems to have a lot of garbage, so it might be good practice." Marcus hesitated, torn between his training responsibilities and his personal connection to this particular house. He turned to Kona, considering how to respond. Noticing Marcus's hesitation, Kona's expression shifted to one of curiosity. "Is this the house everyone at the depot was warning me about?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, something happened here yesterday. You might have heard about it." Kona's eyes widened with understanding. "Oh, I see. If you prefer, you can collect the trash from this house. I can wait until later to practice." For a moment, Marcus was tempted to agree, but then he remembered the manager's words from earlier that morning. Making a conscious choice to fulfill his duties and maintain his professionalism, Marcus shook his head. "No, it's all right," he said, gesturing for Kona to join him. "This is as good a time as any for you to learn. Come on, I'll show you how it's done." Marcus demonstrated the proper technique with several bags, watching carefully as his trainee took control of the mechanical arms. Kona's movements were cautious and slow, but he seemed to be getting the hang of it. After several attempts, Kona turned to Marcus with a grin. "I think I'm getting confident with this. Mind if I try collecting garbage for the next few houses while you drive?" Marcus considered the request. Kona had indeed handled the collection quite well, and Marcus could use a little break. He had been collecting garbage and running for the past hour after all. "All right," Marcus agreed, climbing back into the driver's seat. "But remember, slow and steady, we don't want any accidents." As he settled behind the wheel, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of pride in Kona's progress and lingering concern for Rachel and Lucy. He hoped that wherever they were finding some peace after yesterday's ordeal. As Marcus waited in the cab, hydrating after his earlier exertions, he kept an eye on Kona through the rearview mirror. He watched as his new partner efficiently collected the garbage from the next house, pleased with the progress he was making. However, sooner enough Marcus noticed something odd. Kona had finished collecting the trash from the last house, but instead of returning to the truck, he was lingering by the mailbox, his gaze fixed on Rachel's house. Puzzled, Marcus rolled down the window. "Kona, what are you doing? We should move on to the next house." Kona started as if caught off guard. He turned to Marcus with a sheepish smile. "Oh, sorry, I was just looking at this mailbox. We don't have ones like these in Cuba, at least not in the area where I lived." Marcus furrowed his brow, confused by the unexpected explanation. "You never saw a mailbox?" Kona shrugged. "Well, not like this. They're different in Cuba." Something about Kona's excessive interest raised a subtle flag in Marcus's mind. It seemed an odd thing to be so fascinated by, especially given their tight schedule. But before he could dwell on it further, movement at Rachel's house caught his attention. Rachel appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed against the warm glow of the early morning light spilling from the house. She paused, scanning the scene outside. Her gaze swept over the garbage truck, its dented metallic body glinting under the sun, before settling on Kona, who stood by the rear of the vehicle. Her brows knitted slightly, a hint of confusion crossing her face, but her expression shifted when her eyes landed on Marcus in the driver's seat. Marcus spotted her and quickly hopped out of the cab, the sound of his boots crunching against the gravel breaking the stillness. His face broke into a welcoming smile as he approached. "Good morning, Rachel. How are you holding up?" he asked, his tone warm yet tinged with concern. Rachel's tense posture softened at the sight of him, her lips curving into a faint smile. "As well as can be expected, I suppose. We've been cleaning non-stop since yesterday." Marcus nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I could tell from the amount of trash. You must have gone through the house pretty thoroughly." Rachel let out a weary sigh, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Including anything related to Dennis. I don't want a single trace of him left in this house." Marcus's gaze lingered on her for a moment, before he asked gently, "Are you still planning to move to your mother's?" He remembered her mentioning it yesterday, her voice tight with resolve. She nodded, her determination evident. "Yes, we're packing up now. I'm putting the house on the market as soon as possible. We need a fresh start." Before Marcus could reply, the sound of footsteps emerged from the house. Lucy, Rachel's teenage daughter, appeared in the doorway, lugging an oversized trash bag that looked far too heavy for her slight frame. She squinted in the sunlight, then her face lit up as she spotted Marcus. "Marcus," she called out, her voice bright despite the weight of the past days. "I'm so glad you haven't left yet. Can we still throw this away? Marcus smiled warmly at her as she approached, struggling slightly under the load. He stepped forward to help, but not before glancing at Kona. Yeah, sure, Lucy. You can just give it to my partner over there. This is my new partner, Kona, he introduced. He's training today. Marcus pointed to the man with long, curly hair. Kona offered a polite nod, his posture slightly stiff but his eyes kind. Rachel returned the gesture briefly, her attention quickly darting back to Lucy as she trudged forward. Just as Lucy reached them, everything seemed to happen at once. A piercing scream tore through the air, so sharp and sudden it froze everyone in place. Lucy's bag of trash hit the ground with a dull thud, its contents spilling out in disarray. Before anyone could react, Kona sprang into action. With a speed that defied expectation, he scooped Lucy up into his arms in one fluid motion, his focus razor-sharp. "Lucy!" Rachel's voice faltered as Kona bolted toward the truck, his grip firm but careful. Marcus's jaw dropped as Kona reached the cab, yanked the door open, and slid inside with Lucy. The door slammed shut with a metallic clang, and the distinct sound of the lock clicking into place echoed in the stunned silence. "Kona, what are you doing?" Marcus shouted, his voice edged with both confusion and alarm. He started toward the truck, but the engine roared to life, its deep rumble breaking through the moment like a thunderclap. Lucy's face was pressed against the window, wide-eyed and pale but unhurt. She seemed more stunned than frightened, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound coming out. Rachel stood frozen, her hand flying to her mouth. "Marcus, what is happening?" she cried, her voice trembling. For a split second, Marcus stood frozen in shock. Then instinct kicked in. He sprinted after the accelerating garbage truck, his legs pumping with desperate energy. But the truck was too fast, quickly outpacing him. His muscles burned with the effort, but after a while he couldn't keep up. As the truck disappeared around a corner, Marcus turned back to the house. The sight that met his eyes made his heart sink. Rachel had collapsed on the front lawn, her body racked with sobs. In that moment, Marcus faced an agonizing choice: continue the futile chase or provide immediate assistance to Rachel. With a heavy heart, knowing he couldn't catch the truck on foot, Marcus made his decision. He turned and ran back to Rachel, his mind already racing with what to do next. Marcus reached Rachel's side in seconds, gently helping her to her feet. "Rachel, we need to get inside. Come on, I've got you." He guided her into the house, settling her on the couch. Rachel's body shook with sobs, her face pale with shock and fear. Marcus knelt in front of her, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stop!" "Rachel, I'm going to call the police right now, then I'll contact my company. We're going to find Lucy, I promise." Rachel nodded weakly, her eyes wide with terror. Marcus squeezed her hand reassuringly before stepping outside to make the calls. His first call was to the police. Despite the chaos of the situation, Marcus's voice remained steady as he provided crucial details: the truck's information, Kona's description, and Lucy's situation. The dispatcher assured him that units would be dispatched immediately and that they would contact the garbage collection company for tracking information. Next, Marcus called his company. The moment the receptionist answered, he cut straight to the chase. "This is Marcus Taylor. There's been an abduction using one of our trucks. The authorities have been notified and will be contacting you for tracking information." The receptionist's shocked silence was quickly replaced by assurances that they would cooperate fully with the police. "We'll activate the truck's GPS tracking immediately," she promised. "We'll call you back as soon as we have a location." Returning inside, Marcus found Rachel on the phone, her voice breaking as she explained the situation to someone. As she hung up, she turned to Marcus with tear-filled eyes. "That was my mother. She's on her way." Marcus nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Rachel, do you have any idea where they might be taking Lucy?" Rachel's face crumpled. I don't know. The airport, maybe. Yesterday, Dennis said he would take Lucy where we can't find her." "Oh, God. What if they're trying to leave the country?" "You still keep her passport, right?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, but remember yesterday? He said he has connections. The possibility sent a chill down Marcus's spine. If they made it to the airport, the chances of finding Lucy would decrease dramatically. They needed to act fast. Just then, Marcus's phone rang. He answered it quickly, stepping outside to hear better. It was his company again. "We've located the truck," the dispatcher said. "It stopped on a roadside just outside of Brightwood. I'm sending you the exact location now." Marcus's heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. "Thank you," he said quickly. "Please keep monitoring its location and update the police." As he ended the call, Rachel appeared in the doorway, her face set with determination despite her tear-stained cheeks. "Where are they?" she demanded. Marcus showed her the location on his phone. "The truck stopped just outside of town. Rachel, maybe you should wait here." But Rachel was already shaking her head. "No, I'm coming with you. That's my daughter out there, Marcus. I need to be there." Recognizing the fierce maternal instinct driving her, Marcus nodded. "All right, but we'll take your car. I'll drive." As they rushed to Rachel's car, Marcus's mind was already plotting their next moves. He just hoped they weren't too late. Marcus maneuvered Rachel's car through the streets with practiced ease, his years of navigating the garbage truck coming in handy as they raced towards the location of the abandoned vehicle. Rachel sat tensely beside him, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. As they approached the site, they could see the flashing lights of police vehicles long before they spotted the garbage truck. Marcus's heart sank as he realized they weren't the first to arrive. He pulled up behind a police cruiser, and they both jumped out of the car. The scene before them was one of controlled chaos. Police officers swarmed around the abandoned garbage truck like ants surrounding a sugar cube, their movements methodical as they searched for clues. But even from a distance, Marcus could see that the truck was empty. There was no sign of Lucy or Kona. A wave of anxiety washed over Rachel as she took in the scene. "Where are they?" she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. A nearby officer approached them, his expression grim. "Ma'am, are you the child's mother?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak. The officer continued, his tone professional but sympathetic. "We're doing everything we can to locate your daughter. We found some evidence inside the truck that we're processing now." As the officer spoke, another police car pulled up. The officer who stepped out had an air of authority about him, clearly a detective. He strode over to them, his face set in a serious expression. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked, addressing Rachel. When she nodded, he continued, "I'm Detective Johnson. I'm afraid I have some information that complicates our situation." Rachel's face paled. "What is it?" The detective took a deep breath. "We've just received word that Dennis Harper was released on bail this morning." The news hit Rachel like a physical blow. She staggered, and Marcus quickly moved to support her. "What?" she gasped. "How is that possible?" "It appears his lawyer managed to arrange it," Detective Johnson explained. "Given this new information, we have to consider the possibility that Mr. Harper may be involved in your daughter's disappearance." Rachel's shock quickly turned to anger. "Of course he's involved," she spat. "This whole thing reeks of Dennis. He must have hired Kona to take Lucy. Yesterday he threatened to take her somewhere I couldn't find her." The detective's eyebrows rose at this information. "That's very important, Mrs. Harper. We'll need to look into Mr. Harper's recent contacts and movements." Marcus, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "Detective, given this new information, shouldn't we be closing state exits? If Dennis is trying to leave with Lucy—" Detective Johnson shook his head grimly. "Unfortunately, without concrete evidence of Mr. Harper's direct involvement, we don't have the authority to take such drastic measures. Right now, our kidnapping investigation has to focus on Kona." Marcus felt a surge of frustration. "But surely there must be something we can do. They couldn't have gotten far." The detective considered for a moment. "You're right that time is of the essence. Mr. Taylor, you know this truck better than anyone. Would you mind taking a look inside? There might be something you'd notice that we've missed." Marcus nodded eagerly, glad to have something concrete to do. As he approached the truck, he could hear Rachel providing more details about Dennis to the detective. Inside the cab, Marcus's trained eye swept over every surface. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then, as he was about to give up, something caught his eye. Wedged under the seat near the door was a small hair clip. Marcus carefully retrieved it, his heart racing as he recognized the distinctive charm attached to it, a cat sipping boba tea. He quickly exited the truck, the hair clip clutched in his hand. "Detective," he called out, "I found something." As he showed the clip to Rachel, her eyes widened in recognition. "That's Lucy's," she confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "She was wearing it this morning." The detective bagged the clip as evidence, but for Marcus, the small accessory had triggered a moment of inspiration. It was a small lead, but it confirmed that Lucy had indeed been in the truck. More importantly, it gave him an idea when he saw the cat charm. Turning to Rachel, Marcus asked urgently, "Rachel, I know this might seem odd, but I need to know about Dennis's drinking habits. Did he have a preferred store where he bought his alcohol?" Rachel looked confused for a moment, but then understanding dawned on her face. "Yes, actually. There's a liquor store not far from here, just a few miles past the gas station. Dennis always said they had the best selection." Marcus quickly relayed this information to Detective Johnson. "Sir, I think we should check out that liquor store. If Dennis is involved, he might have stopped there. He's an alcoholic, right? He might have needed a drink to calm his nerves." The detective nodded, seeing the logic in Marcus's reasoning. "Good thinking, Mr. Taylor. We'll split our forces. One team will visit the liquor store. Another unit will check other alcohol stores near the police station. We will inform you of any updates." Rachel, who had been listening carefully, spoke up with resolve. "I'm coming too. I can't just sit here and do nothing." Marcus recalled Mr. Cosby's warning earlier that morning about avoiding surprises and steering clear of other people's personal affairs. He could easily wait for the truck investigation to conclude and return it to the depot, but he couldn't bring himself to leave Rachel behind. "I'm going with Rachel," Marcus said firmly. "She won't be alone, and we promise not to interfere with your investigation." Detective Johnson looked like he was about to protest, but the determination in Rachel's eyes made him pause. "All right, Mrs. Harper," he conceded, "but please understand the risks. Stay in the car and let the officers handle any confrontations." Rachel nodded her agreement, and soon they were on the move. Marcus gripped the steering wheel of Rachel's car, his eyes locked on the police cruiser ahead, its flashing lights slicing through the late afternoon haze. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the police radio spilling from the cruiser. Inside, the air smelled faintly of stale beer and cleaning products. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the aisles of bottles and cans. A young man stood behind the counter, his nervous energy palpable as his gaze flicked between the police officers and the security cameras mounted on the walls. Detective Johnson stepped forward, his badge catching the light as he addressed the clerk. "We need to see your security footage from the last few hours," he said, his tone firm and authoritative. The clerk's eyes widened and he shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his uniform shirt. I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that without the manager's permission," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Detective Johnson's expression hardened. "Son, this isn't a request. We're investigating a serious matter, and we need that footage now." Marcus watched the exchange, his protective instincts kicking in as Rachel shifted closer to him. He could feel the tension radiating from her, a mix of anxiety and determination. He placed a steadying hand on her arm, hoping to anchor her as they waited. "Look," Marcus said, stepping in to address the clerk, "we're not here to cause trouble. Just show the detective the footage, and we'll be out of your hair." The clerk hesitated, glancing over his shoulder toward a door marked "Employees Only." After a moment, he sighed and nodded. "All right, follow me," he said, his tone brooking no argument, as he led them to the back office where the surveillance monitor was placed. Marcus stayed close to Rachel, his presence a silent source of support. The walls of the narrow hallway seemed to close in around them, the tension growing with each step. When they finally reached the small room filled with monitors, all eyes turned to the screens, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Rachel's eyes darted around, taking in the surroundings, her mind clearly racing. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice low and calming. "You okay?" She nodded, though her face betrayed her lingering unease. I hope this gets us somewhere." "It will," Marcus said firmly. "We'll figure this out." Soon they were huddled around a small monitor in the back office, watching grainy footage from the store's cameras. At first there was nothing unusual, just the normal comings and goings of customers. But then, about an hour earlier, a familiar face appeared on the screen. "That's Kona," Marcus exclaimed, pointing at the figure entering the store. They watched as Kona approached the counter, speaking briefly with the clerk before being handed a package. He didn't purchase any alcohol, instead simply collecting what appeared to be a pre-arranged pickup. "What was in that bag?" Detective Johnson demanded, turning to the clerk. The young man looked uncomfortable. I don't know exactly. The manager just told me to give it to him when he came in. It felt like it had some bottles in it, and there was an envelope too." "An envelope?" Rachel repeated, her voice sharp. "What was in it?" The clerk shook his head. "I don't know, I swear, I never opened it." Detective Johnson's eyes narrowed. "We're going to need to speak with your manager. Where can we find him?" The clerk's discomfort grew. I'm not sure. He doesn't come in very often. I don't even know where he lives." As the detective continued to question the clerk, Marcus's attention was drawn back to the security footage. He watched as Kona exited the store, package in hand. But something about his departure caught Marcus's eye. "Wait," he said, rewinding the footage slightly. "Look at how he arrived versus how he left." The others gathered around the screen again. Sure enough, they could see that Kona had arrived on a motorcycle, driven by someone else. But when he left, it was in a white van. "Can you zoom in on that van?" Marcus asked. The clerk fumbled with the controls for a moment before managing to enlarge the image. It was grainy, but they could just make out part of a license plate. 6XLT923, Marcus read out. "It's not complete, but it's something." Detective Johnson was already on his radio, relaying the partial plate number to his team. "Good catch, Mr. Taylor," he said, a note of respect in his voice. As they prepared to leave, Marcus had one more question for the clerk. "Which direction did you see the van go when it left?" The clerk pointed towards the intersection. "Straight ahead, I think, but I can't be sure." It wasn't much, but it was a lead. As they left the store, Marcus could feel a renewed sense of hope. They were on the right track. Now they just had to move fast enough to catch up. Marcus and Rachel climbed back into her car, following closely behind the police cruiser as they headed in the direction the clerk had indicated. The tension in the car was palpable, both of them scanning the road ahead for any sign of the white van. They had been driving for about 30 minutes when Marcus spotted something that made his heart race. There, parked outside a rundown bar, was a white van with a license plate that matched the partial number they had. "There!" Marcus exclaimed, pointing it out to Rachel. Rachel's eyes widened as she saw it too. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Do you think Lucy's in there?" Marcus carefully parked Rachel's car at a distance, not wanting to alert anyone inside the bar to their presence. The police car pulled up parallel ahead them, and Detective Johnson quickly approached their window. "Good eye, Mr. Taylor," he said in a low voice. "We've called for backup. I need you both to stay in the car while we investigate. Understood?" Rachel looked like she wanted to argue, but Marcus placed a calming hand on her arm. "We understand, Detective. Please be careful." As the detective and his partner cautiously approached the bar, Marcus kept his eyes peeled, scanning the area for any sign of movement. That's when he noticed something across the street. At the gas station a few meters ahead, a dark figure with distinctive long, curly hair was visible through the convenience store window. Marcus's heart began to race as he recognized Kona. "Rachel," he whispered urgently. "Look at the gas station. I can see Kona." Rachel winced, then gasped as she spotted him too. But it wasn't just Kona. As they watched, they could make out two other figures in the store. A man who looked like Dennis but wearing sunglasses, and another unknown man. And there, just visible beneath the window's frosted section, were a pair of small feet in bright-colored flip-flops. "Lucy," Rachel breathed, her voice a mixture of relief and fear. That was the sandal she wore when she stepped out of the house. Marcus's mind was working overtime. It was clear now that Kona had been paid by Dennis to abduct Lucy. The mysterious third man must be the one Dennis had referred to yesterday, the connection that could make Lucy disappear. "Rachel," Marcus said urgently, "you need to alert the police. They're looking in the wrong place." Rachel nodded, quickly exiting the car and hurrying towards the bar, where the police were investigating. Marcus, meanwhile, had another plan forming. Carefully, he maneuvered Rachel's car, positioning it behind the white van parked at the gas station. It was an identical model to the one they had initially spotted at the bar. By blocking its exit, he hoped to prevent any quick escapes. Just as he finished parking, he saw Kona emerge from the store, his face panicked as he spotted the police car across the street. Kona quickly ducked back inside, presumably to warn Dennis. Marcus knew he had to act fast. Without waiting for the police, he exited the car and strode purposefully towards the convenience store. As he entered, he found himself face to face with Dennis, Kona, and the unknown man, who were in the process of trying to transfer Lucy to the mysterious third party. "Marcus!" Lucy cried out, her voice filled with relief and fear. Dennis and Kona immediately turned to face Marcus, their expressions a mixture of surprise and anger. Dennis's face contorted with rage as he recognized the garbage collector who had foiled his plans the day before. "You again," Dennis snarled. "You just can't mind your own business, can you? Do you have a death wish or something?" Marcus stood his ground, his eyes never leaving Lucy. "Let her go, Dennis, it's over." Dennis laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Over? I don't think so. You're outnumbered, garbage man. What do you think you're going to do?" Marcus could hear sirens in the near distance, growing louder by the second. He just needed to buy a little more time. "I'm not going to do anything, Dennis, but in about 30 seconds, this place is going to be swarming with police." As if on cue, the screech of tires could be heard outside, followed by shouts of, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" The next few moments were a blur of action. Dennis lunged for Lucy, but Marcus was faster. He managed to grab the girl and pull her behind him, just as the police burst through the door. In the chaos that followed, Marcus focused solely on protecting Lucy. He felt a fist connect with his jaw, Kona's, he thought, but he barely registered the pain. All that mattered was keeping Lucy safe. When the dust settled, Dennis, Kona, and the mysterious man were all in handcuffs. Lucy clung to Marcus, her small body shaking with sobs of relief. As Rachel burst into the store, Lucy ran to her mother's arms, their tearful reunion bringing a lump to Marcus's throat. Detective Johnson approached Marcus, a look of grudging respect on his face. "That was a risky move, Mr. Taylor, but I can't deny it paid off. You might have a future in law enforcement if you ever get tired of collecting garbage." Marcus managed a small smile, wincing slightly at the pain in his jaw. "I think I'll stick to garbage for now, Detective. It's usually less exciting than this." As the police began to process the scene, Marcus watched as Dennis was led to a squad car. The man's earlier bravado had crumbled, replaced by a look of desperate fear. "This isn't over," Dennis shouted as he was pushed into the back of the police car. "I'll be back, and when I am, you'll all pay." Marcus shook his head, turning away from Dennis's empty threats. His eyes met Rachel's, and in that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they had won this battle. Lucy was safe, and Dennis's plans had been thwarted. As the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, Marcus suddenly felt the weight of the past 2 days settle on his shoulders. He was exhausted, sore, and pretty sure he was going to have an impressive bruise on his jaw. But looking at Lucy, safe in her mother's arms, he knew it had all been worth it. The convenience store buzzed with activity as police officers secured the scene and began collecting evidence. Marcus stood to the side, watching as Rachel hugged Lucy tightly, both of them crying tears of relief and joy. The sight warmed his heart, making the ache in his jaw seem insignificant in comparison. Detective Johnson approached Marcus, a look of grudging respect on his face. "Mr. Taylor," I have to say, your actions today were both incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. You could have been seriously hurt. Marcus nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. I know, Detective, but I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The detective's expression softened slightly. Well, your instincts were spot on. We've apprehended all 3 suspects and the child is safe. That's what matters most. Back inside the store, Detective Johnson was overseeing the collection of evidence. He turned to Marcus as he limped back in. Mr. Taylor, are you all right? Do you need medical attention? Marcus shook his head. I'm fine, Detective, just a few scrapes. What's happening now? The detective gestured towards the back of the store. We've uncovered something interesting. Come take a look. Marcus followed Detective Johnson to a small office behind the counter. Inside, they found a sophisticated setup of computers and what looked like equipment for creating fake IDs. That man's name is Barthold Neumans, and this is his operation, the detective explained. It seems he is running an identity forgery network. Looks like we've caught him red-handed. As they examined the room, an officer approached with an evidence bag. Sir, we found this in the package from the liquor store. Inside the bag was an envelope. The detective carefully opened it, revealing what appeared to be new identities for Lucy and Dennis. Marcus's eyes widened. So that's how Dennis was planning to disappear with Lucy? Detective Johnson nodded grimly. Exactly. And this might just be the tip of the iceberg. We'll need to investigate the entire chain of liquor stores. There could be a whole network involved in this operation. As they exited the office, Rachel approached with Lucy in her arms. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. Marcus, she said softly, I don't even know how to begin thanking you. You've saved Lucy twice now. Before Marcus could respond, Detective Johnson interjected. Mr. Taylor, I have to say, you've shown remarkable instincts and bravery throughout this ordeal. Have you ever considered a career in law enforcement? We could use someone with your sharp mind and kind heart on the force. Marcus was taken aback by the suggestion. I hadn't really thought about it, he admitted. I've always been content with my job as a garbage collector. The detective nodded understandingly. Well, if you ever change your mind, I'd be happy to put in a good word for you at the academy. As the group prepared to leave for the police station to give their official statements, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief that Lucy was safe, pride in his role in her rescue, but also a gnawing uncertainty about what the future might hold. The drive to the police station was quiet, the adrenaline of the day's events finally starting to wear off. Marcus sat behind the wheel of Rachel's car, with Rachel in the passenger seat and Lucy curled up in the back, finally sleeping after her ordeal. As they drove, Rachel broke the silence. I can't believe how elaborate Dennis's plan was, she said softly, careful not to wake Lucy. Hiring Kona to infiltrate the garbage company, arranging fake IDs. It's terrifying to think how close he came to succeeding. Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. It was elaborate but not particularly smart, he replied. Using a new employee at the garbage company to kidnap Lucy? That was bound to raise suspicions. Rachel let out a small, nervous laugh. You're right, I guess I should be grateful that Dennis isn't as clever as he thinks he is. He always relied more on his money than his brains. From the back seat, Lucy stirred. Mom, she called out, her voice small and frightened. Are we really safe now? Can we move somewhere Dad can't find us? Rachel turned in her seat, reaching back to stroke Lucy's hair. Yes, sweetheart, we're safe now. Tonight we'll stay at Grandma's house, and then we'll figure out our next steps. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Lucy's eye. And Lucy, he added, the police have uncovered a lot of evidence. Your dad will be secured by the police for a long time. He won't be able to hurt you or your mom again. Lucy seemed to relax a little at this, settling back into her seat. Rachel turned to Marcus, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Again, I don't know what we would have done without you. As they pulled into the police station parking lot, Marcus's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer it, recognizing his manager's number. Marcus, His manager's voice came through the speaker, sounding both exasperated and relieved. "I specifically asked for no strange interventions today, and yet here we are again." Marcus couldn't help but chuckle. "I know, sir, I'm sorry, it's been quite a day." He quickly explained the situation to his manager, detailing Kona's involvement and the rescue operation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, his manager spoke again. "The HR will need to answer this. Where did they find that man, Kona?" He sighed. "While I'm proud of what you did, Marcus, perhaps you should consider a new occupation, maybe at a different depot, or even with the police department." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Are you firing me, boss?" No, I'm just saying," his manager quickly assured him. "We're already short-staffed. If I fire you, who would collect the trash tomorrow? But if the police want you one day, I won't hesitate to let you go any time." Marcus smiled at the dark humor. "Thank you, sir. I'll definitely be at work tomorrow morning." "You'd better be. I'll see you tomorrow first thing in the morning in my office," Mr. Cosby said firmly before ending the call. As Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket, his thoughts drifted to the whirlwind of the past 2 days. What had begun as an ordinary job, just a garbage collector making his rounds, had spiraled into something far beyond his expectations. In the span of 48 hours, he had not only helped rescue a child, twice, but also stumbled upon what seemed to be a major criminal operation. His role, so seemingly simple, had transformed into something much larger, a chance to protect his community in ways he never thought possible. The memory of Detective Johnson's words lingered in his mind. Perhaps the detective was right, maybe he was cut out for a job at the police department. But as the thought took hold, Marcus shivered. The idea of living in that constant rush of adrenaline, facing danger head-on every day, sent a chill down his spine. He wasn't sure he was ready to trade the quiet routine of his current life for the high-stakes world of law enforcement. For now, he decided, it was enough to have done what he could. The rest would have to wait. Rachel touched his arm gently. "Are you ready to go in?" Marcus nodded. As they climbed the steps to the entrance, Lucy reached for his hand. The gesture touched him deeply, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they now shared. As they reached the swing doors of the department, Marcus jogged up the steps after Rachel and Lucy. Whatever the future held, wherever they decide to move next, he knew one thing for certain. He would always be there to help those in need, whether that meant collecting their garbage or saving them from danger. With that thought in mind, he stepped through the doors, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.